She had the clipboard, the designer heels, and 6 years of HOA dictatorship. What she didn't have was the legal right to any of it. Linda Hawthorne stood in my driveway that Tuesday morning, waving a violation notice like a royal decree. $500 monthly for parking my own trucks on my own property. The audacity was breathtaking. These HOA tyrants thought they owned my life. While threatening to foreclose my house for too many vehicles, her husband's massive RV sat permanently in their yard like a monument to hypocrisy. The woman actually believed she could steal my home while violating her own rules. What Linda didn't know would destroy her completely. Buried in dusty county records was something that would flip this entire power dynamic. Something that would transform her from neighborhood dictator into criminal defendant faster than concrete sets in summer heat. Have you ever wanted to absolutely demolish someone who thought they had power over you? Because that's exactly what happened here, and the revenge was so sweet it's still legendary in Riverside County. Let me paint you the picture of how this whole nightmare started. My name is Mike Torres, I'm 52, and I run Torres Concrete Solutions here in Riverside, California. Third-generation contractor. My grandfather started with a wheelbarrow and a dream. My dad built it into a real business, and I turned it into a $2.3 million operation with 15 local guys on payroll. 6 months earlier, I'd gone through a divorce that felt like financial surgery without anesthesia. Nothing dramatic, just two people who grew apart. But I needed a fresh start somewhere. My ex-wife's lawyer couldn't find more assets to divide. So I bought this pristine 3-bedroom ranch house in Maple Ridge subdivision for $485,000 cash. Perfect neighborhood. The kind of place where you could smell fresh mulch and Saturday morning coffee drifting from every driveway, mixed with the sweet scent of jasmine climbing white picket fences. I put another 30 grand into landscaping because I believe in doing things right. My 3 work trucks, a concrete mixer, flatbed, and crew pickup, sat neatly in my circular driveway like sleeping giants. That's when I met Linda Hawthorne, and let me tell you, meeting Linda was like stepping on a landmine disguised as a welcome mat. Picture a 58-year-old retired bank manager who'd been HOA president for 6 years, running unopposed. She lived in the neighborhood's crown jewel, a massive colonial that probably cost $800,000 and looked like it belonged in a mortgage commercial. This woman measured grass height with an actual ruler and carried a clipboard on her morning inspection walks. Her designer heels clicked on the pavement like a metronome counting down to somebody's doom, every morning at exactly 8:15 a.m. The first time she introduced herself, I should have called a moving truck. "Welcome to Maple Ridge, Mr. Torres. I trust you understand our community maintains certain standards. Not nice to meet you or welcome to the neighborhood. Community standards." Like she was immigration and I was applying for a visa. For 3 months, everything seemed fine. I kept my property magazine perfect, helped elderly Mrs. Morgan next door with groceries, even fixed her cracked walkway for free. My trucks were parked legally in my own driveway, same as everyone else's boats, RVs, and luxury cars. Then came that Tuesday morning in October when my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. Mail carrier with a certified letter that felt like a legal grenade. The paper was cheap copy stock, but the threat was premium quality. "Violation notice," screamed in bold red letters. "Commercial vehicles exceed community aesthetic standards and negatively impact property values. Immediate compliance required or face escalating penalties." Here's where it got interesting. Linda demanded I pay a $500 monthly aesthetic impact fee or remove my trucks entirely. $500 for parking my legal work vehicles on my own property that I owned outright. I spent that evening reading every page of my HOA covenants twice. No mention of commercial vehicle restrictions anywhere. But here's the beautiful irony. Every Wednesday, Linda's landscaping crew parked their diesel trailer, industrial mowers, and chemical tanks right in front of her house for 4 hours. The acrid smell of their equipment exhaust hung in the air like automotive hypocrisy. When I knocked on her door that evening to discuss this like adults, Linda stood in her doorway like she was defending the Alamo. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I reviewed the covenants. There's no restriction on work vehicles. The board has authority to implement new rules for community welfare. Your industrial trucks are inappropriate for a residential area. But your landscapers park commercial vehicles here weekly." Her smile could have frozen antifreeze. "That's different. That's maintenance service, not industrial storage." Different. In that moment, watching her face, I realized this wasn't about trucks or property values. This was about power, control, and maybe something uglier, like deciding who deserved to live in her neighborhood. I had two choices: surrender or fight back. What Linda didn't know was that she'd just declared war on someone who was about to discover he owned the entire battlefield. But first, she was going to hand me even more ammunition. Linda didn't waste time escalating this war. 3 days after our doorway confrontation, I found another certified letter in my mailbox. Emergency HOA board meeting scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. 24 hours notice for a meeting that would address ongoing community compliance issues. I showed up to find exactly 3 people in Linda's living room: herself, her neighbor Margaret Finch, and some rental property owner named Bob. 3 out of 7 board members. The room smelled like vanilla candles and fresh desperation, because what they were about to attempt was completely illegal. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Torres," Linda said, settling into her wingback chair like a discount dictator. "We've called this meeting to address the commercial vehicle situation." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "This meeting violates HOA bylaws requiring 7-day advance notice." Linda's smile could have curdled milk. "Emergency situations allow expedited proceedings." "What emergency?" "My trucks have been there for months." That's when Bob tried to play peacemaker. "Look, Mike, we're just trying to maintain property values. Maybe we can work something out." "The board has voted," Linda announced. "Commercial vehicle ordinance passes. You have until Monday to comply or face $100 daily fines." I leaned back in their uncomfortable folding chair. "You voted? I didn't see any vote." "We voted before you arrived," Margaret mumbled without eye contact. Beautiful. A secret vote before an illegal meeting to pass an invalid ordinance. These people had apparently skipped the day they taught HOA law in dictator school. See, I'd learned something during my divorce proceedings. Bylaws are contracts, and when boards enforce rules selectively, they violate equal protection principles that courts absolutely demolish. That weekend, I did some investigating that would make a private detective proud. Turns out Linda's son, Danny, runs Hawthorne Landscaping and parks his trailer, industrial mowers, and chemical tanks overnight in our neighborhood twice a week. Not during service calls, overnight storage. Meanwhile, Linda's husband Frank had a 35-foot RV and boat trailer permanently planted in their side yard, like monuments to hypocrisy. Monday morning arrived with the sweet sound of opportunity knocking. The next board meeting was Tuesday evening at the community center, and I came armed with a manila folder thick enough to stop bullets. I'd invited Mrs. Morgan and neighbor Jake Patterson as witnesses, because what I was about to do deserved an audience. "Before we discuss my trucks," I announced, standing with my evidence folder, "let's address some enforcement inconsistencies." I spread photos across the table like a poker dealer revealing aces. Danny's landscaping trailer parked overnight on Maple Street. Frank's RV violating their own aesthetic standards. 3 other neighbors with work vans, boats, and recreational vehicles somehow invisible to Linda's eagle eyes. The silence was so thick you could spread it on toast. Bob looked like he'd rather be getting a root canal, and Margaret's pen clicking sounded like a nervous woodpecker. "This is targeted harassment," I continued. "You've created rules specifically to attack me while exempting your friends and family." Linda's face was approaching the color of a fire truck. "Those are different situations." "How exactly?" "Mr. Hawthorne's RV is grandfathered under previous regulations." "Show me those regulations." More silence. The air conditioning kicked on, sounding like it was laughing at this circus. "And your son's overnight parking? That's temporary business equipment staging." "My trucks are temporary business equipment staging." "Your trucks are industrial." "Your son's 500-gallon chemical sprayer isn't industrial?" Jake Patterson raised his hand like we were in elementary school. "When were these grandfather clauses established?" Bob shifted like his chair was made of needles. "We haven't formally documented, so they don't exist," I interrupted. "You're improvising exemptions in real time." Linda shot up from her chair like she'd been ejected. "This meeting is about Mr. Torres's non-compliance, not board authority." Here's where things got interesting. I pulled out my phone and held it up like a trophy. "Actually, this meeting is about selective enforcement and discrimination. I'm recording everything for my attorney, and every ridiculous excuse you've made tonight just became evidence." The room went dead quiet except for Margaret's frantic pen clicking. Bob looked like he wanted to tunnel through the floor to escape. "Mrs. Hawthorne," I said, enjoying every second, "either enforce your rules equally or admit they're bogus." But I'm not paying extortion fees for violations that half the neighborhood commits daily. Linda's composure finally shattered like cheap glass. Her voice went up an octave. Mr. Torres, if you continue this disruptive behavior, we'll be forced to take stronger action. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. Because what Linda didn't know was that while she'd been busy playing neighborhood dictator, I'd already started digging into her background. And what I'd discovered was going to turn her world upside down faster than a concrete mixer in an earthquake. Linda's stronger action arrived like a plague of locusts. Wednesday morning, I was loading concrete mix when a white city van pulled up. Out stepped Linda with some guy in a clipboard and hard hat, her former colleague from the planning department, judging by their chummy conversation. The morning air carried the scent of fresh asphalt and impending bureaucratic warfare. Anonymous complaints about noise and safety violations, she announced with the smugness of a cat presenting a dead mouse. This inspector looks like he'd rather be getting a colonoscopy, probably because showing up with the complainant destroys any pretense of impartiality. I watched this poor bastard walk around my property for 20 minutes, measuring setbacks, checking permits, photographing everything like he was documenting a murder scene. Linda stood behind him, pointing at my trucks and whispering suggestions that sounded suspiciously like coaching a witness. The concrete dust from my mixing area tickled my nose as I waited for their verdict. When he finished, the inspector actually smiled and shook my hand. Beautiful setup, Mr. Torres. Your concrete pad exceeds code requirements, trucks are properly registered, and your property maintenance is exemplary. No violations found. Linda's face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a microwave. But Linda wasn't done playing games. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the State Contractor Licensing Board claiming anonymous complaints about illegal business operations from residential property. Someone had filed a formal complaint alleging I was running an unlicensed commercial operation, storing hazardous materials, and violating zoning laws. The complaint was detailed, specific, and completely fabricated. I'd bet my favorite sledgehammer that Linda's manicured fingerprints were all over this paperwork, along with the lingering scent of her vanilla perfume. While dealing with that bureaucratic nightmare, I decided to investigate Linda's background more thoroughly. My accountant buddy Bobby Morgan had taught me some tricks during my divorce about finding financial records, and what I discovered made Linda's harassment campaign look like amateur hour. She'd filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago, then refinanced her house twice in 18 months. Her credit report showed more red flags than a Soviet military parade. Most interesting was a pattern that made my blood pressure spike. She'd been targeting specific homeowners for violations, and every single one had sold their houses within 6 months at below-market prices. This wasn't just about my trucks. Linda was running a systematic harassment campaign designed to force out working-class families and bring in higher-income residents. During my years in construction, I'd learned that board members owe something called fiduciary duty to all homeowners. Basically, they can't use their position for personal vendettas without courts awarding serious financial damages to victims. Her complaint letters followed identical templates, her violation notices targeted the same demographics, and her emergency meetings always seemed to coincide with properties hitting the market. She was gentrifying the neighborhood one lawsuit at a time. I hired attorney Patricia Valdez, who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for turning board presidents into legal roadkill. After reviewing my documentation, Patricia filed formal complaints about selective enforcement and requested complete audits of HOA finances and Linda's decision-making process. Patricia's smile when she explained the potential damages reminded me why I always hired the best subcontractors. Linda's response was predictably thermonuclear. She called a special assessment vote for neighborhood beautification, proposing a $5,000 per household fee for aesthetic improvements and community enhancement. During her presentation at the community center, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps while she kept mentioning how this would maintain appropriate neighborhood standards and attract quality residents. Her supporters, mostly retirees and McMansions, nodded along like dashboard bobbleheads, while working families looked like they'd been hit by financial freight trains. After the meeting, Linda cornered me in the parking lot where the smell of cooling asphalt mixed with her desperation. Mr. Torres, this could all go away if you'd just be reasonable about your truck situation. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Define reasonable. Her eyes glittered like broken glass in the streetlight. a modest relocation fee to cover administrative costs, say $50,000. The number hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. There it was, attempted extortion caught on digital recording. Linda had just handed me enough evidence to bury her deeper than a septic tank foundation. The community was fracturing faster than concrete in an earthquake. Working families organized resistance meetings in Jake Patterson's garage, while Linda's supporters formed her neighborhood standards committee. Mrs. Morgan confided that Linda had visited her, suggesting elderly residents might be happier in senior communities with proper support services. 3 more families received foreclosure threats over manufactured violations. Jake got cited for his kids' bicycles being improperly stored in his own garage. Teacher Sarah Mills was written up for driving a car inconsistent with community image standards. But Linda had made one catastrophic mistake in her quest for suburban dictatorship. She'd declared war on someone who was about to discover he possessed legal weapons of mass destruction in this particular battle. While she played petty tyrant, I was uncovering something in the county records that would detonate her entire power structure like controlled demolition. Linda's next move was so audacious it deserved a trophy for neighborhood villainy. She announced a partnership with Pinnacle Properties, a development company that specialized in transforming modest subdivisions into luxury playgrounds for the wealthy. At a hastily called board meeting, the conference room reeked of cheap coffee and expensive schemes as Linda presented glossy brochures showing enhanced neighborhood concepts, featuring upscale condominiums and premium amenities. She explained how selling our common areas for community improvement would generate beautification funds, conveniently omitting that her husband Frank had been secretly consulting for Pinnacle Properties for 6 months, earning fees that mysteriously matched their mortgage payments. I'd discovered Frank's consulting arrangement through financial records, but decided to let Linda excavate her own grave before I provided the shovel. Sometimes in construction, the smartest move is watching the other crew's foundation crack before pointing out their structural failures. Jake Patterson, leveraging his journalism background, had been documenting Linda's clandestine meetings with Pinnacle representatives, photographing license plates and recording visit schedules. Our investigation revealed a systematic acquisition plan targeting distressed properties at below-market prices, followed by complete subdivision redevelopment into luxury housing that working families couldn't afford. The harassment campaign escalated like a natural disaster gaining strength. Linda instituted monthly compliance inspections that resembled military occupations more than neighborhood oversight. She issued violations for grass height variations of half an inch, mailbox colors allegedly violating community aesthetics, and Mrs. Morgan's beloved garden gnome collection that apparently threatened residential dignity. The metallic click of Linda's designer heels on concrete sidewalks became our neighborhood's air raid siren, warning residents to hide anything that might trigger her regulatory wrath. My concrete business transformed into her primary battlefield target. Linda threatened legal action for chronic noncompliance and claimed authority to ban my customers from neighborhood streets. When the Hendersons hired me to replace their deteriorating driveway, Linda positioned herself like a surveillance operative, photographing truck movements and timing concrete deliveries with stopwatch precision. She attempted to find neighbors who hired my services, claiming they were facilitating violations of established community standards. Watching Linda try to intimidate 40,000-pound concrete mixers was like observing someone attempt elephant herding with a feather duster and unrealistic expectations. Linda's nuclear strategy revealed her true intentions with crystalline clarity. She filed property liens against 5 homes, including mine, for accumulated unpaid assessments and violation penalties. Her legal notices claimed foreclosure authority within 90 days if payments weren't immediately received. These documents arrived via certified mail with official courthouse weight, but they were constructed on legal foundations shakier than a condemned building in an earthquake zone. Linda was essentially threatening to steal our homes for violations that were questionably legitimate in the first place. During this escalation phase, I conducted investigations that would impress professional detectives. Attorney Patricia had recommended requesting comprehensive HOA records under state disclosure laws, and the files I obtained contained more explosive material than a demolition warehouse. Linda had systematically diverted HOA funds for personal legal expenses, disguising her bankruptcy attorney fees as administrative consultations. Community reserve funds designated for maintenance had vanished into unauthorized expenditures that coincidentally matched Linda's documented financial emergencies. The smoking gun emerged when I discovered email exchanges between Linda and Pinnacle Properties discussing residential demographic optimization and clearing problematic current residents. One message explicitly targeted working-class homeowners and ethnic families who allegedly wouldn't match the upgraded community profile standards. Reading those communications felt like uncovering a conspiracy documented in black and white, complete with strategic timelines for manufacturing violations and accelerating foreclosure proceedings. The stench of discrimination was stronger than concrete sealer fumes. Mrs. Morgan tearfully revealed that Linda had visited with legal paperwork suggesting incompetency proceedings, claiming elderly residents required professional care environments rather than independent neighborhood living. Jake Patterson documented systematic harassment over his children's outdoor toys, which Linda classified as unsightly residential deterioration factors. Sarah Mills, our divorced teacher neighbor, faced relentless targeting for driving a modest Honda instead of luxury vehicles matching Linda's community expectation standards. Our neighborhood fractured faster than poorly mixed concrete in freezing weather. Linda's supporters, predominantly affluent retirees in oversized houses, formed her Community Standards Coalition, while working families organized resistance meetings that resembled underground revolutionary gatherings. Property values plummeted due to constant chaos, which perfectly served Linda's agenda of creating distressed sale opportunities for her development conspiracy partners. 3 additional families received foreclosure threats, prompting local news coverage of our escalating neighborhood conflict. Linda embraced media attention like a politician during election season, portraying herself as a dedicated guardian of property values battling commercial encroachment. She scheduled press interviews on her manicured front lawn, strategically positioned beside her husband's massive RV while condemning my work trucks for destroying neighborhood character. The hypocrisy was thicker than wet concrete and twice as obvious. But while Linda basked in her media spotlight and neighborhood dictator role, I was uncovering county records that would detonate her entire power structure. Something about my property's legal classification that Linda had catastrophically failed to investigate. Something that would transform the predator into prey faster than a concrete truck dumps its entire load, turning Linda's empire into demolished rubble. The discovery that obliterated Linda's entire world happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon in the county recorder's office, where the air hung thick with dust motes dancing in fluorescent light and the musty perfume of decades-old legal documents. Attorney Patricia had suggested researching the original subdivision development to strengthen our harassment case against Linda. What we found instead was legal plutonium that would vaporize Linda's tyrannical empire. Dorothy, the perpetually cheerful clerk who'd been filing documents since disco was popular, pulled out the original subdivision plat from 1987. The yellowed papers crackled like autumn leaves as she spread them across the worn counter, and immediately something made Patricia freeze mid-sentence. My property wasn't listed like the others. Instead of standard residential designation, mine was marked Master Developer Lot, with covenant language that made Patricia's eyes bulge like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "Holy shit, Mike," Patricia whispered, forgetting her professional decorum. "Do you realize what you're sitting on?" I squinted at the legal hieroglyphics covering the page. "Enlighten me before I have a heart attack from suspense." She jabbed her finger at specific clauses buried in the covenant maze. Your property retains master developer rights from original subdivision creation. The builder kept approval authority over all HOA decisions, and those rights transfer automatically with ownership. The revelation hit me like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus. "You're saying I can veto Linda's rules?" Patricia's grin could have powered the building's electricity. "Not just veto. According to these covenants, master developer has approval authority over all new ordinances, assessment changes, and board decisions. Linda's commercial vehicle ordinance? Dead without your signature. Her special assessments? Legally worthless toilet paper. Her fines? Invalid fantasies from a powerless dictator. We spent 2 hours excavating this legal gold mine while rain drummed against windows like applause for our discovery. The original developer had died 5 years ago, his estate sale including my house and all master developer privileges. The previous owner either missed this jackpot or didn't care, but everything had transferred to me automatically. I'd been wielding nuclear weapons while Linda attacked me with foam pool noodles. Patricia outlined the full scope of my inherited superpowers with barely contained excitement. Master developer traditionally holds 51% voting weight in HOA matters. You can remove board members with 30-day notice. You can override any rules implemented without your approval. And here's the beautiful part. You can demand financial damages for harm caused by invalid board actions. The taste of pending victory was sweeter than concrete dust after a perfect pour. But beyond personal vindication, I felt something more powerful brewing. Linda had systematically terrorized working families, threatened elderly residents like Mrs. Morgan, and discriminated against anyone failing her suburban perfection standards. Now I possessed legal authority to demolish her reign of terror and rescue every family she'd victimized. Justice was about to be served with concrete, mixer-sized portions. We could destroy Linda's operation immediately, Patricia continued, but strategic patience will maximize damage. Let her continue excavating this crater while we document everything. When we publicly reveal your master developer status, the psychological impact will be devastating. Every rule she's passed, every fine she's issued, every threat she's made becomes evidence of board fraud and potential criminal activity. I thought about Mrs. Morgan facing incompetency threats, Jake Patterson harassed over children's toys, Sarah Mills targeted for automotive choices. Linda had been playing chess while assuming she was the queen, never realizing I owned the entire board, the pieces, and the table. The cosmic irony was more perfect than a flawlessly level foundation. She'd been trying to exile me from a neighborhood where I held ultimate legal authority. Walking out of that courthouse into the cool evening air, I felt like I'd inherited a kingdom. Linda had spent months making my life miserable, completely unaware she was attacking someone who could legally annihilate her authority with a single covenant document. The predator was about to discover she'd been stalking an apex predator, and her hunting season was permanently closed. The next phase felt like assembling the ultimate construction crew for the most satisfying demolition project of my career. Saturday morning, my kitchen table became mission control, coffee brewing while legal documents spread across the surface like blueprints for Linda's destruction. The rich aroma of Colombian dark roast mixed with the intoxicating scent of impending justice as Patricia and I mapped our strategy. "We're not just stopping Linda," she explained. "We're building a case that protects every family and ensures this nightmare never repeats." Bobby Morgan, our forensic accountant and Mrs. Morgan's sharp-eyed son, became our financial detective. When I showed him Linda's HOA expense reports, his reaction was immediate and colorful. "Mike, this woman's been treating community funds like her personal ATM. These administrative consultation fees perfectly match her bankruptcy lawyer's billing cycles." His laptop keys clicked like machine gun fire as he cross-referenced dates with Linda's court filings. Here's something every homeowner should know from Bobby's expertise. HOA boards must maintain detailed financial records called general ledgers and check registers, and you have legal rights to examine these documents for personal expenses disguised as community business. Jake Patterson transformed his spare bedroom into a surveillance command center that would make the FBI jealous. Timeline charts covered every wall, while photography equipment capable of documenting evidence from 3 blocks away occupied his desk. "Every harassment incident gets documented with timestamps and witness statements," Jake explained while calibrating his cameras. "Linda's discrimination pattern will be so obvious that a legally blind judge could convict her." The mechanical whir of his printer churning out evidence sheets sounded like a slot machine hitting jackpot. Sarah Mills volunteered as our community educator, using teaching skills to inform neighbors about rights they never knew they possessed. Her own harassment documentation revealed Linda's laser-focused targeting of single mothers, elderly residents, and working-class families. During our planning sessions, Sarah's insight cut through legal complexity like a chainsaw through balsa wood. Linda's not just power-hungry, she's operating a systematic discrimination campaign with HOA authority as her weapon. Sarah's strategy involved hosting backyard meetings that felt like underground resistance gatherings where families shared horror stories and learned their legal options. Patricia outlined our legal strategy with surgeon-like precision. Master developer rights give us nuclear capability, but conventional weapons strengthen the case. We're filing for breach of fiduciary duty, selective enforcement, financial mismanagement, and civil rights violations. She'd researched similar cases where board members faced 6-figure personal liability judgments for exceeding authority and targeting demographics. Patricia's smile when discussing potential damages reminded me why I always hired the best subcontractors for critical projects. Bobby's financial investigation uncovered $47,000 in unauthorized diversions from reserve funds, including Linda's personal legal fees disguised as community consultations. Her expense reports showed payments to her son's landscaping company at 30% above market rates, while legitimate maintenance requests were denied for budgetary constraints. Most explosive was evidence of kickback arrangements with Pinnacle Properties, where Linda received consulting fees for facilitating neighborhood disruption that would benefit redevelopment schemes. Our intelligence operation expanded beyond financial crimes to document Linda's harassment methodology. Jake's photographs captured selective enforcement in vivid detail, her son's industrial equipment parked overnight while my legal trucks faced daily persecution, her husband's massive RV violating aesthetic standards she imposed on others, her personal vehicles exceeding community parking limits without consequences. We cataloged every double standard, every discriminatory action, every authority abuse that Linda had committed during her suburban dictatorship. Sarah's underground meetings felt like wartime resistance gatherings where families shared harassment testimonies while she documented each incident with academic thoroughness. Mrs. Morgan revealed Linda's attempts to declare her incompetent for maintaining gardens that allegedly violated aesthetic standards. The Hendersons described foreclosure threats for hiring my concrete services. Every family had experienced Linda's targeting, and every story added ammunition to our discrimination arsenal. Watching these families realize they weren't alone was like watching concrete set, slow at first, then suddenly unbreakable. Meanwhile, I maintained normal routines while secretly preparing Linda's public execution. My concrete business continued serving neighborhood customers despite her intimidation campaigns, and every job became evidence-gathering opportunities. I documented Linda's interference with legitimate commerce, her attempts to ban customers from public streets, and threats against neighbors who hired my services. Each incident strengthened our case, while Linda remained oblivious to legal explosive charges being planted beneath her authority foundation. Here's the beautiful irony that kept me awake nights with anticipation. Linda was constructing her own gallows with every illegal action she committed. Our strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Let her continue digging until retreat became impossible, then detonate everything during a public meeting with maximum community attendance and media coverage. Linda had spent months building her tyrannical empire, never suspecting she was creating evidence for her own destruction. The hunter had become the hunted, and Linda was walking deeper into a trap baited with her own arrogance and seasoned with her victims' patience. Linda's desperation reached nuclear levels when she realized her harassment campaign wasn't working. 2 weeks after our planning sessions, I received a foreclosure notice that looked more official than a Supreme Court subpoena. The thick legal paper smelled like fear and expensive attorneys as Linda claimed authority to seize my property for accumulated violations and unpaid assessments. She'd scheduled foreclosure proceedings for the following month, apparently convinced that financial terrorism would force me to surrender. What Linda didn't know was that every threatening document she filed was digging her legal grave deeper than a septic tank foundation. The sabotage started subtly, like termites eating a house from the inside. My work trucks began experiencing mysterious problems: sugar in gas tanks, slashed tires, and scratched paint that spelled out "Go away" in jagged letters. The acrid smell of vandalism lingered in my driveway like a toxic cloud, while Linda maintained plausible deniability by being conspicuously visible during each incident. She'd scheduled her morning inspection walks to coincide perfectly with my discovery of damaged equipment, creating alibis while maximizing my frustration. Watching Linda feign shock at my misfortune was like watching a toddler deny eating cookies with chocolate smeared across their face. But Linda's most devious move targeted my business reputation directly. Anonymous complaints flooded the Better Business Bureau claiming I'd performed shoddy work, stolen materials, and violated safety regulations. Fake online reviews appeared overnight describing fictional disasters involving my concrete services. Torres Concrete destroyed my driveway and flooded my basement, read one obviously fabricated review posted by concerned homeowner 47. The digital assault was so coordinated it looked like a military psychological operation designed to destroy my livelihood through character assassination. While Linda escalated her attacks, I maintained my normal routine like nothing was happening. Every morning I loaded my trucks and headed to job sites, documenting each act of harassment while appearing completely unbothered by her campaign. My crew noticed the tension but followed my lead, treating Linda's intimidation attempts like annoying weather that would eventually pass. The sound of concrete mixers rumbling to life each morning became our defiant anthem, drowning out Linda's clicking heels and whispered threats. Jake Patterson's surveillance operation captured Linda's coordination with her supporters in damning detail. His telephoto lens recorded late-night meetings in Linda's backyard where she distributed assignments to her Community Standards Coalition. Margaret Finch received instructions to file noise complaints whenever my equipment started before 8 a.m. Bob was tasked with photographing every neighbor who hired my services. Linda's husband Frank was assigned to follow my trucks and document traffic violations during concrete deliveries. The conspiracy was more organized than a military operation, and twice as petty. The community pressure intensified like a pressure cooker approaching explosion. 3 more families received foreclosure threats over manufactured violations that would make a comedy writer weep with laughter. The Patels were cited for hanging laundry outside because it created visual pollution inconsistent with community standards. Elderly Mr. Rodriguez faced fines for parking his 20-year-old pickup truck in his own driveway because it was commercially branded with his plumbing business logo. Linda's enforcement had become so absurd that neighbors started comparing violation notices like trading cards, laughing at the creative ways she'd found to harass working families. Local news picked up the story when Linda called a press conference to announce her partnership with Pinnacle Properties. Standing on her manicured lawn beside her husband's prohibited RV, she explained how upgrading neighborhood demographics would benefit everyone. The irony was thicker than wet concrete as Linda complained about commercial vehicles while literally standing next to her own violations. Reporter Amanda Morgan, no relation to our Mrs. Morgan, asked pointed questions about selective enforcement that made Linda's prepared answers sound like a politician denying obvious corruption. But Linda's nuclear option revealed her true character in spectacular fashion. She arranged for city inspectors to visit my home weekly, claiming anonymous reports of safety violations and illegal business operations. Each inspection cost taxpayers money and accomplished nothing except harassment, but Linda had enough political connections to maintain the pressure. The sound of official vehicles pulling into my driveway became as regular as mail delivery and twice as annoying. Linda's final desperate gambit was attempting to have my business license suspended through her connections at the planning department. She filed formal complaints alleging I was operating an illegal commercial enterprise from residential property, storing hazardous materials without permits, and violating zoning regulations. The paperwork was professionally prepared and strategically timed to coincide with her foreclosure proceedings, creating maximum legal pressure designed to force my surrender. Through all this escalation, I maintained the calm demeanor of someone holding royal flush cards while everyone else panicked over their weak hands. Linda was burning through her credibility and political capital like a house fire consuming dry wood, while I collected evidence that would fuel her destruction for years. Every harassment attempt was documented, every false report was recorded, every abuse of authority was photographed for future legal proceedings. Linda thought she was playing chess, but I was playing 4-dimensional warfare with nuclear weapons she couldn't see coming. Linda's final acts of desperation arrived like a Category 5 hurricane making landfall. 3 days after the news story aired, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit appeared at my door carrying a briefcase that screamed "corporate attorney." The morning air carried the metallic scent of impending storm clouds as he introduced himself as Richard Castellanos, legal representative for concerned community stakeholders. His cologne was expensive enough to choke a horse, and his smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. "Mr. Torres, my clients are prepared to offer a generous settlement to resolve this unfortunate neighborhood dispute." The offer was breathtaking in its audacity. $50,000 cash to relocate my business operations and drop all complaints against Linda and the HOA. "Consider this a goodwill gesture," Castellanos explained, sliding a cashier's check across my kitchen table like he was dealing blackjack. "My clients simply want to restore community harmony." The veiled threat hung in the air thicker than concrete dust on a windless day. "Of course, if you prefer continued legal complications and business disruptions, that's entirely your choice." I pulled out my phone and started recording, watching his polished demeanor crack like cheap paint in summer heat. But Linda wasn't finished playing dirty pool. The smear campaign escalated from online reviews to full-scale character assassination involving Child Protective Services. Anonymous calls reported that neighbors with children were being endangered by industrial equipment and hazardous materials. CPS investigators arrived at Jake Patterson's house to inspect his children's living conditions after complaints about unsafe neighborhood environments created by commercial activities. The sound of official voices questioning parents about their children's safety because of my legal business operations made my blood pressure spike higher than a concrete pump. Linda's psychological warfare expanded to targeting elderly residents with bureaucratic terrorism. Mrs. Morgan received visits from Adult Protective Services after concerned citizens reported her as potentially incompetent due to neglected property maintenance and inability to maintain community standards. The sweet, elderly woman who baked cookies for neighborhood children suddenly found herself defending her mental capacity to government officials. Watching Mrs. Morgan's confusion and fear during these visits was like watching someone kick a puppy. It required superhuman restraint not to immediately destroy Linda's operation. The harassment network had grown into a full-scale conspiracy involving city officials, contractors, and what appeared to be organized crime methodology. Linda's husband, Frank, began following my work trucks, photographing license plates and documenting delivery schedules like he was conducting industrial espionage. Her son Danny started bidding against me for neighborhood concrete jobs, submitting estimates 30% below cost to steal my customers. The coordination was so sophisticated it resembled a military operation designed to destroy my livelihood through economic warfare. Community tensions reached breaking point when Linda called an emergency meeting to announce the Pinnacle Properties partnership as a done deal. The community center reeked of anxiety and cheap folding chairs as she presented architectural renderings showing luxury condominiums replacing our modest homes. Current residents will have first opportunity to purchase upgraded units, Linda announced with the sincerity of a snake oil salesman, though obviously not everyone will qualify for the enhanced community standards. The implied threat was clear: submit to her authority or face forced relocation through financial pressure. Linda's supporters began abandoning her sinking ship faster than rats fleeing a flood. Margaret Finch quietly resigned from the board after learning about the criminal investigation into HOA financial irregularities. Bob discovered that his rental properties were also targeted for harassment and switched sides overnight. Even Linda's closest allies started questioning her increasingly erratic behavior and obvious personal financial motivations. The sound of her political support structure collapsing was music sweeter than concrete mixers humming in perfect harmony. But Linda's ultimate overreach revealed her complete disconnection from legal reality. She announced at the emergency meeting that foreclosure proceedings would continue regardless of community opposition, claiming board authority supersedes individual property rights in matters of community welfare. She actually believed her HOA presidency gave her government-level powers to seize private property. Linda had crossed the line from neighborhood tyrant to delusional dictator, and her public statements were being recorded by multiple sources for future legal proceedings. The breaking point came when Linda attempted to physically prevent my customers from accessing neighborhood streets. She positioned herself like a human roadblock, clipboard in hand, demanding identification from concrete truck drivers and threatening to call police for trespassing violations. Watching a 58-year-old retired bank manager try to intimidate union concrete drivers was like watching someone challenge a freight train to a pushing contest. Entertaining for spectators, but potentially fatal for the challenger. Meanwhile, my secret preparation was reaching final stages like a demolition project approaching detonation. Patricia had authenticated all master developer documentation with county officials. Bobby had completed financial analysis proving Linda's embezzlement, and Jake had assembled video evidence that would make prosecutors weep with joy. The community was primed for Linda's public destruction, media contacts were briefed for maximum coverage, and legal documents were prepared for immediate filing. Linda had spent months constructing her own scaffold, and execution day was approaching faster than gravity pulls falling concrete. The annual HOA meeting arrived like Judgment Day, and the community center had never seen anything like it. 89 of our 94 homeowners packed into a room designed for 50, with folding chairs squeezed together like sardines in a legal can. The air conditioning struggled against body heat and rising tension while the scent of nervous perspiration mixed with industrial-strength floor cleaner. Local news crews positioned their cameras at the back, their bright lights turning the meeting into a televised spectacle. Officer Martinez from the sheriff's department stood near the exit, called for crowd control but clearly expecting fireworks. Linda entered like a queen approaching her coronation, designer heels clicking against linoleum with military precision. She wore her most expensive suit and carried a leather portfolio thick enough to stop bullets, radiating confidence that would have been impressive if it wasn't about to be obliterated. Her supporters, now reduced to 5 retirees and her obviously uncomfortable husband, clustered around the front table like bodyguards protecting a dictator. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps preparing to swarm. "Thank you all for attending tonight's crucial meeting," Linda announced, settling into her chair like she was claiming a throne. "We have important business regarding neighborhood improvements and compliance enforcement." Her voice carried across the packed room with the authority of someone who genuinely believed she controlled everyone's destiny. The crowd's murmur sounded like distant thunder before a devastating storm. Sarah Mills stood first, presenting a petition with 67 signatures opposing Linda's harassment campaign. Her teacher's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel through flesh. "Mrs. Hawthorne, this petition represents families demanding your immediate resignation for abuse of authority, selective enforcement, and discrimination against working-class residents." The crowd erupted in applause that sounded like machine gun fire echoing off concrete walls. Jake Patterson followed with his documentation project, reading a timeline of harassment incidents that made Linda's face cycle through more colors than a neon sign. Violation notices targeting single mothers, elderly residents threatened with incompetency proceedings, and systematic persecution of minority homeowners, Jake announced while cameras captured Linda's increasing discomfort. "This isn't community improvement, it's ethnic cleansing disguised as property management." Linda's composure began cracking like concrete under pressure. "These accusations are unfounded troublemaker propaganda designed to undermine legitimate board authority," she snarled, abandoning her professional demeanor. "Mr. Torres and his supporters are disrupting our community's progress toward higher standards." She gestured towards me like I was personally responsible for neighborhood decline. "If you continue supporting this disruptive behavior, we'll be forced to take stronger legal action." Mrs. Morgan struggled to her feet, her voice trembling with emotion that silenced the entire room. "You tried to have me declared incompetent because my garden doesn't match your standards. You threatened to take away my home because I'm old and foreign." Tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, she continued, "This is America. You cannot steal our homes because we're different." The room exploded in supportive applause while Linda's remaining allies looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. That's when I stood up, briefcase in hand, and walked toward the podium with the measured pace of someone about to deliver a death sentence. The crowd noise faded to cathedral silence as I opened my case and pulled out documents that would change everything. "Before Mrs. Hawthorne continues threatening foreclosures and seizures," I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the packed room, "she should know something important about my property deed." I placed the master developer covenant on the overhead projector, and the crowd gasped collectively as the legal language appeared on screen. "According to county records and HOA covenants, my property retains master developer rights from original subdivision creation. Every rule change, every assessment, every board decision requires my approval." The silence was so complete you could hear the ventilation system cycling. Linda's face drained of color faster than water down a broken pipe. "Those documents are fraudulent," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice under weight. "You're lying to manipulate this community." But Patricia was already approaching the podium with authenticated county paperwork and legal opinions that would stand up in any courtroom. "Mrs. Hawthorne," I continued, enjoying every second of her complete meltdown, "as master developer, I hereby declare all your ordinances void, all your fines invalid, and all your foreclosure threats legally worthless." The crowd erupted like a concrete plant explosion, cheering and applauding while Linda sat frozen in disbelief. But I wasn't finished destroying her world. "Furthermore, I'm calling for immediate board removal based on financial mismanagement, abuse of authority, and civil rights violations." Patricia handed me Bobby's financial analysis showing $47,000 in embezzled funds. "Your illegal use of community money for personal expenses constitutes criminal fraud, and law enforcement will be investigating accordingly." Officer Martinez stepped forward as Linda attempted to flee, her designer heels now sounding like a retreat rather than an advance. "Ma'am, please remain seated. Detective Williams would like to speak with you about financial irregularities." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Linda's empire collapsed faster than a demolition in progress, her authority evaporating like morning dew under legal sunshine. The immediate aftermath felt like watching the sun rise after the longest night in history. Within 24 hours, Linda faced criminal charges for embezzlement, attempted extortion, and abuse of public trust while her mugshot graced local news with the caption, "Former HOA tyrant arrested for fraud." Her expression in that photo looked like someone who'd just realized they'd been playing poker with a card shark while holding a handful of napkins. The district attorney's office, smelling corruption like bloodhounds on a fresh trail, filed additional charges for conspiracy and civil rights violations after reviewing Jake's surveillance goldmine. Community transformation happened faster than concrete setting in summer heat. Our emergency board election took place that same evening, with Sarah Mills unanimously elected president, alongside a diverse group of working families who understood that neighborhoods thrive through inclusion, not exclusion. The new board's first official act was refunding every stolen penny, $23,000 returned to families who'd been financially terrorized by Linda's harassment regime. Mrs. Morgan received her refund with tears streaming down weathered cheeks, immediately spending the money on garden expansions featuring every flower color Linda had tried to prohibit. Financial recovery exceeded our wildest construction project dreams. The HOA's insurance company, faced with Bobby's forensic accounting evidence, settled faster than a demolition crew clearing condemned buildings. All legal fees were covered plus compensation for harassment victims, while Linda's frozen personal assets would fund community recovery for years. The Pinnacle Properties development deal collapsed like a house built from playing cards when investors discovered fraud allegations surrounding their partnership with our neighborhood dictator. My concrete business exploded with referrals from grateful neighbors and regional customers who'd followed our story through news coverage and social media buzz. The rumble of mixer trucks became our neighborhood's victory symphony, no longer symbols of persecution but emblems of resilience and working-class pride. 3 families who'd nearly lost their homes to Linda's foreclosure threats hired me for major improvement projects, transforming discrimination targets into my most enthusiastic advocates. The sweet irony was thicker than premium concrete mix. Personal healing came through unexpected friendships that transformed our community's soul. Jake Patterson and I bonded over shared interests in photography and construction, collaborating on improvement projects that brought families together like perfectly mixed concrete. Sarah Mills organized monthly potluck dinners where the aroma of diverse cuisines replaced the stench of contentious meetings, creating genuine fellowship from former conflict zones. Even Margaret Finch apologized publicly and joined our inclusive community efforts, proving redemption was possible for everyone except the truly corrupt. Our crowning achievement was the Neighborhood Heroes Scholarship, established for local students pursuing trade careers. Using recovered funds and supporter donations, we honored Mrs. Morgan's resilience, Jake's investigative courage, and Sarah's community leadership while providing opportunities for working families Linda had tried to exclude. Our first recipient was a brilliant young Latina studying concrete technology, and presenting her award felt like watching justice pour a perfect foundation for future generations. The annual Block Party for Unity Festival became our celebration of diversity triumphing over discrimination. Food trucks representing neighborhood cultures lined streets where Linda once measured grass with authoritarian rulers, while children played safely in areas she'd declared aesthetically inappropriate. The festival's aroma of authentic cuisines mixed with sounds of laughter that permanently drowned memories of clicking heels and whispered threats. Regional media coverage transformed our recovery story into inspiration for communities facing similar institutional harassment. Linda's legal consequences continued accumulating like compound interest on karmic debt. Federal investigators pursued civil rights charges for systematic discrimination. Her law license was suspended pending ethics investigations, and civil lawsuits ensured decades of financial responsibility for damages caused. Her foreclosed house became the neighborhood's most ironic symbol. The woman who tried to steal our homes lost her own to the justice system she'd corrupted. 18 months later, I'm standing in my driveway with morning coffee, watching kids play safely in streets where fear once ruled. My 3 work trucks gleam like monuments to perseverance while Mrs. Morgan waves from her spectacular garden that blooms with rebellious beauty. The morning air carries scents of fresh mulch and brewing coffee instead of vanilla perfume and desperation, and our neighborhood has become the inclusive community Linda tried to destroy. Here's the bottom line. Ordinary people can defeat extraordinary tyranny when they stand together and fight smart. If you've survived your own HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments below because your experience might become our next Justice episode. And if this tale of neighborly revenge against suburban tyranny fired you up, smash that subscribe button for HOA stories because we're just getting started with tales that prove bullies always get their comeuppance.
We appreciate you spending your time with us on HOA Stories, where HOA Karens finally get checked. If you enjoyed today's drama, hit like, comment on your favorite part below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to catch our next HOA Showdown.